Rosa arrived at the tall office building every morning before sunrise. She stepped off the early bus, carrying her small cleaning bag and her old but neat gloves. The streets were still quiet, and the city lights blinked like sleepy eyes waking up slowly. Rosa walked with steady steps. Even though most days she felt tired before the day even began. She was the black cleaning lady everyone thought they understood. To them, she was simple, silent, and invisible. But Rosa had lived a long life full of hard moments. Lessons and secrets she kept safely inside her heart. Inside the building, workers rushed past her every morning. Some held expensive coffee cups. Some talked loudly on their phones. Some didn't notice her at all. The security guard nodded to her without looking up from his screen. The elevator never waited for her, and when she reached out to press the button, her finger always left a faint mark she wiped away immediately. Rosa cleaned floor by floor, room by room. She wiped tables, emptied trash cans, sprayed windows, and polished the shiny tiles people loved to walk on. She knew the whole building better than every employee who worked there. She knew which manager always spilled sugar on the counter, which intern left snack wrappers under the desk, and which supervisor pretended to be busy while playing games on his phone. But even with all this knowledge, the workers still overlooked her. They said things in front of her as if she did not understand English. They joked, complained, and insulted each other without fear because they believed she was no one important. "Cleaner, you missed a spot," one young executive would say every morning, even though the spot was not there. His friends laughed at him, and Rosa smiled softly, knowing she had nothing to prove to people who laughed at others to feel taller. In the break room, two receptionists gossiped loudly every day. They thought Rosa could not hear them. "She looks so old," one whispered. "I would never want a job like that. She probably failed school," the other replied, rolling her eyes. "Imagine cleaning toilets for a living." Rosa wiped the table beside them, her face calm but her heart heavy. She had faced words like these her whole life, and she knew people often insulted others because they feared seeing themselves clearly. Mr. Clark, the boss of the entire company, was the loudest person in the building. He talked fast, walked fast, and shouted orders like a general. But his power was only loud on the outside. Inside, he was insecure, impatient, and always worried someone might replace him. To him, Rosa was not a woman with a name. She was simply you, or hey, or cleaner. He snapped his fingers at her publicly, never greeted her, and acted like she did not exist unless he needed something wiped or picked up. Once, while showing important investors around the office, he saw Rosa mopping near the elevator. He laughed loudly, placed his hand on the investor's shoulder, and said, "Good help is cheap as long as they know their place." The investors gave uncomfortable smiles, but said nothing. Rosa kept her head down, her mop moving slowly, but inside she felt something shift. His words cut her deeply, not because they were new, but because she knew they were wrong, yet she said nothing, because she had learned long ago that silence can be stronger than anger. At lunch, Rosa sat outside on the small bench behind the building. She ate her simple meal of rice and vegetables, watching the sun climb higher in the sky. She listened to the soft noises from inside the building, the laughter, the stress, the footsteps. She wondered if anyone inside knew how much she noticed. Because Rosa noticed everything, especially the things people tried to hide. She heard rumors whispered behind closed doors. She saw fear in the eyes of employees who worked too hard for too little. She heard discussions about mistakes in the company, lawsuits, complaints, and unfair decisions. People discussed these things freely because they believed Rosa did not matter. But Rosa mattered more than they knew. She held information that could shake the company from the inside. She held stories that the boss prayed would never leave the building. One evening, after everyone had left, Rosa was cleaning the large conference room. Papers were scattered everywhere, coffee cups sat half empty, and laptops blinked softly, waiting to be closed. A folder slipped from the table as she wiped the edge. A single sheet fell out and fluttered to the floor like a feather. Rosa bent down to pick it up, and her eyes widened when she saw her own name printed at the top. Primary silent investor, Rosa Daniels, for a moment. The room felt breathless. She stared at the paper, then quietly slipped it back into the folder as footsteps echoed down the hallway. Rosa stood up straight, her face calm again. She was no longer just the woman they overlooked. She was the woman who held their future in her hands. And soon they would finally see her. Rosa woke up the next morning, long before the sun. Her alarm rang softly in the small apartment she called home. She sat up slowly, her mind still replaying the words she had seen on that forgotten paper. Primary silent investor. Rosa Daniels. She whispered it to herself, as if it belonged to someone else. But it was her name, clear as day. Printed with authority, Rosa had always been quiet. But she was never weak. Life had taught her to move gently, to observe carefully, and to speak only when needed now. After years of being ignored, stepped over, and laughed at, a new chapter opened in front of her. She was not just a cleaning lady. She was part owner of the entire company that mistreated her daily. The bus ride felt different that morning. She watched people rush in, half awake, half worried. Holding coffee cups they hoped would save their day, Rosa sat calmly at the window, wondering how many of them would look at her differently if they knew the truth. But she also wondered how many would treat her worse if they realized she had more power than they ever imagined. When she reached the building, she took a deep breath and stepped inside. The security guard barely looked at her, waving her in without checking her bag. "Morning," she said softly, but he didn't reply. He was too busy talking to someone on the phone. Laughing loudly, Rosa smiled to herself. Soon, this same man would stand straighter when she walked in. She changed into her cleaning uniform and tied her apron neatly. Even now, even with the shocking truth she carried, she wanted to do her job with dignity. She picked up her mop, her spray bottle, and her cloth, but this time her hands felt stronger, her steps more confident on the third floor. She found the young executives already laughing. "Here comes the Queen of Mops," one joked, pretending to bow. The others laughed, tapping their fancy shoes against the polished floor. Rosa didn't feel the usual sting in her heart. Today, she simply looked at them and said gently, "Good morning." Her calm tone seemed to unsettle them. One of them stopped laughing, confused by her steady eyes as she wiped the tables. She overheard two workers whispering urgently. "Did you hear?" one said. "The investors are coming again this week." "Yeah. Clark is freaking out," the other replied. Something's going wrong with the finances. Rosa moved quietly. But her ears were sharp. She already knew about the missing funds, the suspicious reports, and the documents Clark tried to hide. She had heard him making secret phone calls, panicking about people finding out. He never imagined the cleaning lady understood every word. At noon, Rosa went to the small bench behind the building, but instead of eating right away, she pulled out a folded paper from her bag. It was the page she had found yesterday, the one with her name. She read it again slowly, letting the truth settle deeper inside her. She remembered the past, how she had signed those papers years ago without knowing their full value. How a friend had offered her a chance to invest in a small company starting out. She had used her entire savings, trusting the friend's honesty. The company had grown faster than anyone expected, but no one had told her what her share was truly worth, until now. The back door opened suddenly, and she quickly slipped the paper away. It was Mr. Clark, pacing angrily while yelling into his phone. "This can't happen now," he barked. "We can't let anyone know about the silent investor." Rosa froze for a moment, her heart beat faster. He continued shouting, "Whoever they are, I'm buying them out before they ruin everything." Rosa's hands tightened on her lunchbox. She watched Mr. Clark stomp around like a furious child, throwing curses into the air. He still had no idea the silent investor he feared was the woman he mocked daily. The same woman who mopped the hallway while he bragged to visiting businessmen. The same woman he once called cheap help. After he walked back in, Rosa sat quietly, letting the warm afternoon breeze touch her face. A new strength filled her chest. She was done being invisible. She was done being disrespected. She was done being overlooked. After lunch, she returned to work, but her steps were firm and confident. She stopped avoiding eye contact. She looked people in the eyes. And some stepped aside without knowing why. In the conference room, she saw the same folder from yesterday. now placed differently on the table. She didn't touch it again. She didn't need to. She already knew her role, her value, her power. That evening, before leaving, she stood alone in the empty lobby for the first time. She looked at the building not as a worker, but as an owner. "This is mine too," she whispered under her breath. The woman they overlooked was about to rewrite everything they thought they knew, and none of them were ready for the truth the next morning. Rosa stepped into the building with a calm confidence that seemed to float around her like a quiet breeze. The doors slid open, and for once, she didn't rush inside like someone afraid of being in the way. She walked slowly, letting her steps echo softly across the marble floor. Something inside her had shifted, and even if the rest of the world didn't see it yet, she felt it deeply. The receptionist, Lila, was filing her nails at the front desk. She glanced up briefly, ready to make one of her usual comments, but when she saw Rosa's eyes, steady, clear, unbothered, she hesitated. The words she meant to say seemed to melt away. "Morning," she muttered instead. Rosa nodded politely, surprising Lila even more. Rosa headed toward the cleaning closet, but before she reached it, she heard raised voices down the hallway. It was Mr. Clark, the boss, shouting again, "No, no, no." He yelled into the phone, "We can't have the silent investor showing up unannounced." Rosa paused. She listened quietly from behind the corner, her heart steady but alert. "We need to control this before the board finds out," he continued, pacing like a trapped animal. "Find out who it is, and I'll handle the rest." He hung up, breathed heavily, then straightened his jacket. As he turned, he nearly walked into Rosa, who had stepped out calmly with her mop and bucket. He flinched slightly, not expecting her. "You?" he said sharply. "Don't stand behind corners like that." "Yes, sir," Rosa replied with a calm tone that made him frown. She walked past him without lowering her head. Mr. Clark watched her, suddenly feeling a strange discomfort he couldn't explain on the 5th floor. Rosa cleaned quietly as workers scrambled to meet impossible deadlines. She heard phones ringing nonstop, keyboards clacking like frantic insects, and anxious whispers filling the air. The atmosphere felt heavy, almost fearful. It was as if everyone sensed something big was coming, but didn't know from where. 2 managers whispered near the conference door. "I heard the meeting today is important," one said. "Something about new ownership issues." "Yeah," the other replied. "Clark looks like he hasn't slept." Rosa kept wiping the glass wall. Pretending not to hear inside, her mind pieced the puzzle together. She realized the company was in much deeper trouble than she had imagined. At noon, the entire office buzzed with tension. Rosa walked to the break room to refill her cleaning bottle. The same young executives who often mocked her were there, eating loudly and bragging as usual, but today, something felt different. They weren't laughing at her. They were too busy arguing. "I'm telling you," one whispered, "if the board brings in someone new, we're all done." Rosa poured water slowly, her ears sharp. She remembered the paper she had found her being the primary silent investor, and suddenly, a thought struck her. Could it be her they feared without even knowing? After lunch, she went to the rooftop for a moment of quiet. The air was cool, and the city stretched far into the distance like a wide painting. Rosa closed her eyes. Letting the wind brush against her cheeks, she needed a plan. She thought about the years she had worked in silence, the insults, the jokes, the disrespect, the people who treated her like a piece of furniture. She could expose the missing funds, confront the board, or buy out Mr. Clark completely. But revenge wasn't her goal. She didn't want to destroy the company. She wanted to transform it so no other worker would ever feel as invisible as she had felt. That afternoon, Rosa noticed something unusual. People were watching her. Not openly, but with subtle, confused glances. Maybe it was the way she walked, or the new calmness in her eyes. Or maybe they sensed the shift in the air around her. People can feel power even before they understand it. When she reached the 10th floor, she found the door to the boardroom slightly open. Curious voices echoed inside. She paused, leaning just enough to listen without being seen. "Clark is hiding something," one board member said. "He's been moving money," another added, "in this silent investor. Why haven't they come forward?" Rosa held her breath. She didn't know they were already suspicious of the boss. We need to uncover everything before the meeting tomorrow, a woman concluded firmly. The boardroom went silent after that. Rosa stepped back and continued her work, but her heart beat with fierce purpose later, while she dusted the railing near the main staircase. Mr. Clark stormed down from the top floor. He looked furious. "Did you touch anything in the boardroom yesterday?" he demanded. Rosa looked up calmly. "No, sir," she replied. He narrowed his eyes. "You better not get involved in things above your level," he snapped. Rosa bowed her head slightly, but when she raised her eyes again, her voice was soft yet steady. "Maybe my level is not what you think it is," she said. Clark blinked, taken aback for the first time. He didn't know how to respond as Rosa walked away. Her heart felt balanced and strong. She was no longer just the cleaner in the background. She was the quiet storm the building never saw coming. And tomorrow, everything would change whether they were ready or not. The morning of the big meeting arrived with a strange kind of electricity in the air. Even the building felt different, as if the walls were holding their breath. Employees moved quickly through the hallways, whispering to each other about rumors that had grown louder overnight. Some spoke about missing money, others about a mystery investor, and many wondered why Mr. Clark looked more nervous than usual. Rosa stepped off the elevator with her cleaning bag. Her head held steady. She was calm on the outside, but inside her heart beat with a quiet strength she had never felt before. She had spent the night thinking deeply, replaying every detail she had seen and heard. She knew today would be the day everything finally shifted. The day silence stopped being silence and started being power. As she walked through the lobby, people stared without meaning to. They didn't understand what was happening, but they sensed something new around her. Even the receptionist, Lila, paused mid-sentence when Rosa greeted her. The workers weren't used to looking into Rosa's eyes and seeing confidence looking back. Rosa changed into her uniform and put on her gloves slowly. She tied her apron neatly and took her mop with both hands. Even though the world was about to change, she refused to abandon her dignity or her work ethic. It wasn't the mop that defined her, it was the heart holding it on the 4th floor. She found the same young executives gathered like frightened schoolboys. This time, however, they weren't laughing, they were arguing. "Clark is hiding something big," one whispered. "If the board finds out." "We're done," another muttered. Rosa passed by silently, and their voices dropped instantly. Something about her calm steps made them uneasy. She continued cleaning, but her mind remained sharp. She knew the board was meeting at noon, and she knew Mr. Clark would try to twist the truth. He always had a way of making himself look innocent and blaming others. But today, even his loud voice wouldn't save him. When Rosa reached the conference floor, she noticed a group of board members arriving early. They were dressed in sharp suits and carried important papers, yet their eyes were filled with suspicion. They didn't trust the man running their company anymore. They didn't trust the numbers, the reports, or the excuses as they passed by Rosa. One of the board members, an older woman with silver hair and a firm expression, smiled kindly at her. It surprised Rosa. Very few people in the building ever smiled at her. "Good morning," the woman said. "Good morning," Rosa replied softly. Little did the woman know she was greeting the silent investor she had been looking for. Around 11, Rosa entered the empty break room to refill her spray bottle. She stood quietly at the sink when suddenly she heard the door open harshly behind her. It was Mr. Clark, his face red with panic. "Where is it?" he hissed, slamming drawers open and closed. Rosa stepped aside calmly, watching him destroy the neat room in seconds. "Where is what, sir?" she asked. He whirled around, eyes wild. "The document," he snapped. "The investor list? Did you touch it?" Rosa remained still. "No, sir," she said. "I only clean." Her calmness only made him angrier. "You better stay out of this," he growled, pointing a shaking finger in her direction. "You don't belong anywhere near company business." Rosa looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she said quietly, "Sometimes people belong." Mo for a second. He wondered if she knew something. But he shook the thought away after all. She was only the cleaner, or so he believed. "Right than you think," Mr. Clark froze. At noon, the board members gathered upstairs. The glass boardroom shined under the bright lights, reflecting tense faces and important documents. Mr. Clark strutted in with forced confidence. Sweating under his polished suit, he didn't notice Rosa standing far down the hallway. Cleaning the railing slowly, her ears listened, her heart waited. The meeting began with sharp questions. The board demanded explanations. They wanted to know about the missing funds. The illegal accounts, the lies in the reports. Mr. Clark tried to talk his way out, tried to blame others, even hinted at unreliable staff, but the board wasn't satisfied. Then came the moment Rosa had been waiting for. The silver-haired woman spoke firmly. "We have one important matter left," she said. "We need the silent investor present, Mr." Clark froze. He stuttered. They won't come, why not?" the board demanded. Rosa leaned on her mop. Watching from the hallway, her heart beat steady. Mr. Clark swallowed. "Because they're nobody," he said quietly. "Just someone in the background." Those words floated through the hallway like a final insult. But this time, they didn't land on Rosa's heart. They fueled her steps. Because for the first time, she knew exactly what she had to do next, and she wasn't afraid anymore. The boardroom doors were still closed, but the tension spilled into the hallway like heavy smoke. Workers passed by quietly, stealing nervous glances. Wondering what storm was building behind the glass, Rosa stood at the end of the corridor with her mop, her back straight, her eyes steady. All her life she had walked softly so others wouldn't be bothered by her presence. But today, her quiet steps were guiding her toward a new destiny. Inside the boardroom, voices rose again. "Sharp and demanding, Mr. Clark," one board member said firmly. "We cannot move forward without the silent investor," another added. "This individual owns a significant share, and they must be included." Mr. Clark paced back and forth. Wiping sweat from his forehead, "They're irrelevant," he snapped. "They don't understand business. They don't belong here." Rosa heard every word from the hallway. Each sentence felt like a reminder of every insult she had swallowed, every moment she had been ignored, every time someone treated her like she was made of air instead of flesh and blood. But now, the truth was standing right beside her heart. She had a place in this company, one they could not take from her. Suddenly, the silver-haired board woman appeared at the door. Her stern eyes scanning the hallway, she stepped out for a moment. Taking a deep breath, her gaze fell on Rosa, who was wiping the railing quietly. The woman gave a polite nod. Unaware of who she was looking at, Rosa returned the nod gently. But before the board woman re-entered the room, something made her pause. She turned back toward Rosa. "You're here every day, aren't you?" she asked kindly. "Yes, ma'am," Rosa replied softly. "You must hear things," the woman added, lowering her voice. "We're trying to understand what's happening in this company." Rosa held her mop tightly. "Yes, ma'am," she whispered. "I hear many things." The woman looked at her thoughtfully, then smiled faintly. "Well, thank you for keeping this building running," she said. Then she walked back into the boardroom. Closing the door behind her, inside, the argument continued. Growing louder and harsher, Rosa took a deep breath. Something inside her was rising slowly. Steadily, powerfully, she had been quiet her whole life. But silence was no longer enough. Moments later, the door swung open again. This time violently, Mr. Clark stormed out, his face red with rage. He nearly bumped into Rosa, but didn't apologize. Instead, he pointed at her angrily. "You," he barked. "Stop staring into the boardroom like you belong here." Rosa didn't move. "I'm just doing my work, sir," she said calmly. "Well, do it somewhere else," he hissed. "You don't belong near important meetings this time." Rosa didn't lower her head. She looked at him straight in the eyes, her voice soft but sharp. "You say that a lot, sir," she replied. Clark blinked. Confused by her tone, he opened his mouth to snap again. But the board woman's voice echoed from inside. "Mr. Clark." "We need you back in here." He glared at Rosa one last time and marched back inside. The door shut behind him. Rosa stood still, feeling a quiet fire in her chest. The words she'd heard all her life. "You don't belong. Stay in your place." Your nobody no longer had power over her. She placed her mop against the wall and looked at the large company logo shining at the end of the hallway. For the first time, she felt like its light was shining back at her. not as a worker, but as someone who had earned a rightful place. 20 minutes passed, and the argument inside reached a boiling point. Suddenly, the door opened again, and the bored woman stepped outside once more. Her expression frustrated enough, she muttered under her breath. She looked at Rosa again, studying her more closely this time. "May I ask your name?" she said gently. Rosa hesitated, then answered, "Rosa Daniels." "Ma'am." The woman froze, her eyes widening in shock. "Daniels?" she repeated, her voice softer now. "Yes, ma'am," Rosa replied calmly. The bored woman inhaled sharply. "Would you come inside for a moment?" she asked, her voice shifting with sudden respect. Rosa felt the world pause around her. "That room is not for me, ma'am," she said quietly. But the woman shook her head firmly. "You may not realize this, but it is for you," she said. "More than you know." Rosa stepped forward slowly. Each step, heavy with years of silence, finally lifting, she placed her hand on the boardroom door. Feeling the cool metal under her fingers, inside, she heard voices arguing, voices that had never once spoken her name with respect. When she pushed the door open, the entire room fell silent. Every head turned toward her, some eyes confused, some annoyed, some curious. But one face turned pale, Mr. Clark's. He stared at her with disbelief, his lips parting in shock. The bored woman walked to the center of the room and spoke loudly. "Everyone," she said. "This is Rosa Daniels, and she," the woman continued, pausing for maximum weight, "is the primary silent investor of this company." Gasps filled the room. Rosa stood tall, her hands still gentle, but her presence powerful. She wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't overlooked, ignored, or dismissed. She had stepped into the room they said she could never enter. And now, she was the one everyone had to listen to. For a long moment, no one in the boardroom moved. The air felt heavy, as if every breath had paused inside the room. Rosa stood near the doorway, her uniform clean, her gloves still on, her posture straight. She looked out of place to those who judged her by her job, but to the truth, she belonged there more than anyone understood. Mr. Clark swallowed hard, his face turning pale. He stared at Rosa as if she had risen from the ground beneath him. You can't be serious," he stammered, pointing at her with disbelief. "She's a cleaner," he added, louder this time, hoping the room would agree. But the room remained silent. Every board member watched Rosa with new eyes. The silver-haired board woman stepped forward, her voice firm but respectful. "M's Rosa Daniels," she said clearly. "We owe you an apology for not knowing who you were." Rosa nodded gently, offering a small smile. "It's all right." "Ma'am," she replied softly. Her calmness contrasted sharply with Mr. Clark's panic. "But this is impossible," Clark insisted, his voice shaking. "She couldn't have invested. She doesn't have the..." He stopped himself too late, realizing how cruel his words sounded. Rosa stepped further into the room, standing beside the long glass table. Her voice was steady as she spoke years ago. "Someone I trusted told me to sign papers for a small company. I didn't understand everything, but I put my savings into it." She touched the tip of her glove nervously. "That company grew," she continued, "and no one ever told me what my share became." A quiet murmur ran through the room. The board members exchanged shocked looks, not at her simple English, but at her simple honesty. One man leaned forward, asking, "You mean Mr. Clark never informed you of your ownership?" Rosa shook her head slowly. "No, sir," she replied. "I only found out by accident, Mr." Clark jumped forward, desperate to defend himself. "That document wasn't meant to be found," he snapped. "It was a mistake. She wasn't supposed to see it." He froze again. Realizing his mistake, the board members stared at him with cold disbelief. The board woman raised her hand. "Silencing him, Mr. Clark," she said sharply. "You withheld legal information from an investor." Clark opened his mouth again, but nothing came out. His excuses had run out, and the one woman he always dismissed was now holding every truth he hoped to hide. Rosa turned toward the board. Her hands were trembling slightly, but her voice remained calm. "I don't want trouble," she said. "I don't want trouble," she said. "I only want fairness. When people don't see you," she added gently, "they think you don't see them either." Those words struck the room like lightning. Several board members lowered their eyes, suddenly understanding how easily they too had overlooked her. The board woman cleared her throat. "Ms. Daniels," she said, "would you be willing to answer some questions?" Rosa nodded. "Yes, ma'am," she said. "I will try." One of the men adjusted his glasses. "Have you heard anything unusual in the building recently?" he asked. Rosa's eyes lifted slightly. "Yes, sir," she replied. "Many things." The board leaned in closer. Rosa spoke slowly. Not to hide anything, but to ensure every word landed where it needed to. "I heard about money missing," she said. "I heard about employees scared to talk. Heard about changes in numbers that don't match." She gently tapped her mop handle. "And I heard the boss making calls he didn't want anyone to hear." Mr. Clark burst forward again. "She's lying," he shouted, but the board's eyes were no longer on him. They were on the woman with the mop, the woman who had listened more carefully than anyone in the building. "Rosa," the board woman asked softly, "why didn't you tell someone sooner?" Rosa sighed, a deep, tired sigh that carried years of silence. "Because no one listens to cleaners, ma'am," she said. "No one listens to people like me." Her words flowed gently, but the room felt the weight of each one. Suddenly, one of the older board members stood up. "Ms. Daniels," he said with dignity, "you have more integrity and honesty than this management has shown in years." He turned toward Clark. "And as for you, your time here may be coming to an end." Clark's voice cracked. "You can't do this." He yelled, "You need me." But no one agreed. Rosa looked at him with no anger. "Only truth, sir," she said softly. "I cleaned your mess for years. And now the company has to clean the ones you left behind." A soft gasp swept across the table. Clark froze, his face drained of color. The board woman stepped toward Rosa with genuine respect. "Ms. Daniels," she said, "we want you present in tomorrow's final decision meeting. We would also like your input on the future of this company." Rosa felt her heart flutter. She was still wearing her cleaning apron, still holding her mop, still the same woman they once overlooked. But now, the room saw her not as the cleaner, but as someone with value, power, and voice. She nodded slowly, her eyes warm but brave. "I will be here, ma'am," she said. As she left the boardroom, employees watched her pass. Some confused, some whispering, some wide-eyed. But Rosa didn't walk like a shadow anymore. She walked like someone finally stepping into her own light. And tomorrow, the entire building would feel the full truth of who she truly was. The next morning arrived with a softness that did not match the tension inside the building. The sunrise spread a golden glow over the glass windows. But the people walking in were stiff, worried, and distracted. Everyone had heard bits of the shocking news, though the full truth had not reached all ears yet. Whispers followed Rosa the moment she stepped through the front doors. She carried her cleaning bag as always, but she carried something else too. A quiet power that wrapped around her like a calm, invisible shield. Leela, the receptionist, sat straighter when she saw Rosa. "Good morning," she said carefully, unsure of how to behave now. Rosa gave her a warm, gentle smile. "Good morning," she replied, and continued walking with steady steps. In the hallway, workers paused mid-conversation. Some stepped aside out of respect without even understanding why. Others watched her with wide, curious eyes. The same young executives who once mocked her now whispered among themselves nervously. "That's her," one said under his breath. "The investor? No way," the other replied. "She was just mopping yesterday." "Yeah," the first one said slowly. "And today she could fire all of us." Rosa heard them, but she didn't react. She wasn't here for revenge. She was here for truth. The board meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock. This was the final meeting, the one that would decide the company's future, and Mr. Clark's fate. Rosa changed into her uniform as usual. She looked at the reflection in the small mirror inside the cleaning closet. A woman with tired eyes, but a brave heart, looked back at her. "You've survived harder days than this," she whispered to herself. At 10, Rosa stood outside the boardroom. Waiting calmly, a board assistant approached her with a respectful nod. "Ms. Daniels, they're ready for you," he said. Rosa thanked him softly and walked toward the door inside. The board members sat around the long glass table, their faces serious but respectful. Mr. Clark sat at the end. But he looked nothing like the confident leader he pretended to be. His usually bright tie was crooked, his hands trembled, and his eyes darted nervously around the room when Rosa entered. The board stood up, not just out of politeness, but out of acknowledgement. Rosa paused, surprised and humbled. "No need for that," she said gently. But the silver-haired boardwoman replied, "We stand for owners, Ms. Daniels." Rosa took a seat at the table, her first time ever sitting there. Her mop leaned quietly against the wall behind her. No one laughed at it today. No one mocked the uniform she wore. They looked at her like someone whose voice mattered. The meeting began. The boardwoman spoke first. "We are here today to address the misconduct under Mr. Clark's management," she read reports. "Financial errors, hidden files, and unethical behavior." Evidence piled up like heavy stones. Mr. Clark tried to defend himself, but his voice cracked each time. "It's all misunderstandings," he insisted. But no one believed him anymore. Then the boardwoman turned to Rosa. "Ms. Daniels," she said gently, "we would like to hear from you." Rosa folded her hands on the table. She wasn't used to speaking in front of people, but she wasn't afraid. She spoke softly, but her words carried strength. "I worked here for many years," she began. "I cleaned your halls, your offices, your messes. I stayed quiet because I thought my voice didn't matter." She looked around the room. "But silence teaches you things," she continued. "You hear what others hide, you see what others ignore." The room listened with deep attention. Rosa spoke of the missing funds she overheard people discuss, the fear employees had, the calls Mr. Clark made late at night, the disrespect she witnessed daily, not just toward herself, but toward others too. When she finished, the room stayed quiet for several seconds. Then one board member said, "Ms. Daniels, your integrity is exactly what this company needs." Another nodded. "We vote to remove Mr. Clark from his position." The vote was unanimous. Mr. Clark stood up, red-faced and furious. "You can't fire me?" he yelled. "You need me. I made this company." Rosa looked at him with calm eyes. "Sir," she said softly, "a true leader doesn't fear being seen by the lowest worker." He stared at her. Lost for words, security escorted him out, his anger echoing down the hallway. Then the boardwoman turned to Rosa with a warm smile. "Ms. Daniels," she said, "we want you to help guide the new leadership." Rosa's eyes widened in shock. "Me?" She whispered. "Yes," the woman replied. "You see people clearly, and that is the greatest skill a leader can have." Rosa placed her hands on the table slowly. She had never imagined sitting there, never imagined being asked for guidance, never imagined being seen, the woman added softly. "We would also like to offer you a leadership chair," Rosa exhaled shakily. Her entire life she had been pushed aside, overlooked, dismissed. And now the company she once cleaned was offering her a seat at the table. She nodded gently, tears warming her eyes. "I will do my best," she whispered. The room filled with soft applause, not for the silent investor, not for the woman who discovered corruption, but for Rosa, the woman they once ignored, now stepping into the light she had always deserved.